Why Do Roses Have Thorns? Written and read by Julian Brown. Three boys from the local area, Michael, Xavier and Reese, were asking if Jason would come out to play. Jason looked out from behind his mother at the front door, seeing the cool BMX bike they had with them. Wherever he was in the world, he would lose himself and find himself again riding his bike, exploring for hours on end. He didn't know the boys well, just that they lived locally and attended the same primary school. Any apprehension felt by Jason's mother about releasing her son into the company of these boys was immediately and expertly dealt with by Michael, who was particularly charismatic for his age. "Jason will be fine," he reassured her, Xavier and Reese standing awkwardly by Michael's side. Feeling all was well, Jason kissed his mother and went with the boys. Xavier made some remark about Jason's trainers that he didn't quite get. He guessed it was probably an insult when the other boys burst out laughing. He hadn't yet got used to the ways of boys in South London, so he chose to let this go. Jason was obviously the butt of some joke they had that only local boys would know about. It didn't make him feel very good, but years of moving from school to school meant he was used to it. They walked for about 10 minutes until they reached a road at the top of a hill. At the bottom of the road was an intersection with another busy-looking road with cars speeding by in both directions. Michael gestured for Jason to get on the bike, saying that it was so much fun riding down this hill. Jason looked down the steep decline and felt a sense of dread fill his stomach. "I'm not sure," he said, to which the boys began laughing again. "Are you scared?" Michael asked him accusingly. Jason knew that it was a bad thing for a 10-year-old boy to be scared, so he said, "No," defiantly. It wouldn't do well for him to admit his fear. To do so would be to break the unspoken code among boys. "I'm not scared," he continued, not even convincing himself. "Prove it," shot back Michael, handing the bike over to Jason, inviting him to mount it. "Don't worry, it's fine," said Xavier, backing up Michael. "We ride down this hill all the time." Jason put on a brave face. "Okay," he said, getting on the bike. It was a familiar feeling on the bike seat, and so he thought maybe all would be well once he got moving. "Okay, show us what you got," announced Michael, as if the host of a live broadcast of some sporting event. Xavier seemed to be suppressing a sinister laugh, while Reese's face expressed something like worry. The only way out of this is down, thought Jason, down the hill. Then it would be one of the other boys' turns to prove that they weren't scared either. He waited for the road ahead to clear, and then felt a little push from Michael, just enough to get the bike moving to begin its descent. Well, this is it, he thought, the bike picking up speed. "I'll be okay," he reassured himself, feeling that familiar thrill of facing danger on two wheels. About halfway down the hill, Jason squeezed gently on the brakes to try and slow his speed down. This is when he realized that the bike had no brakes, or they weren't working. What a time to find out. No matter how hard he squeezed on the brakes, it made no difference. He continued to race on, the busy road at the bottom of the hill, with cars flashing by only a second or two in front of him. He felt panic flood his thoughts. Jason had to think quickly. He had to do something. He couldn't risk flying out into the intersection. The cars were going so fast that their drivers wouldn't be able to react quick enough to swerve and miss him. He had to act now. Jason decided to crash head-on into a brick wall on the right just before the road ahead. He simply turned the handlebars rightward, figuring that crashing into a wall would be better than crashing into a moving vehicle. He was flung from the bike, which was mangled by the impact, into a warped mass of metal. Jason lay on the pavement, bruised, grazed, dazed and confused. It took him some minutes to recover. He wasn't sure at first what just happened. All he knew was his clothes were ripped and torn, and bits of his skin hung from his knees and elbows. Jason looked around and saw the twisted frame of the bike. He felt hands pulling him up to his feet. It was Reese and Xavier, now flanking both sides of him. Reese's face showed something like concern, while Xavier could no longer hold back his laughter. Michael seemed thoroughly pleased with the whole event. "Wow, is that how you're going on? Look at what you did to my bike." He was only pretending to be angry, though. Jason could tell from the satisfied smile on Michael's face. It was all very clear now that these boys were not his friends. There was no point in saying anything else. He just wanted to go home. He could barely stand without the boys holding him up. Jason, still in shock and scarred red from head to toe with one of his trainers missing, was scared and disoriented, but felt it was probably best for him to try and laugh along with the boys. Gradually, as they neared the top of the hill, Jason felt able to walk by himself again, unaided. The boys walked him back home and rang the doorbell. The sense of horror Jason felt was not mirrored in his mother's face. She was all too used to seeing him come home with fresh scratches and bruises after playing out with other children. Always she would tell him to take better care, and always she would think, boys must be boys, I guess. Michael gave no explanation. The scene seemed to speak for itself. "Are you okay, Jason?" His mother took him into her embrace. "Yeah," he replied. "I'm okay." Jason's mother turned to the boys and apologized for the damage to the bike. Michael responded by smiling innocently and saying, "It's okay. I needed a new one anyway." She hoped she wouldn't have to deal with any angry parents demanding payment for a new bike. "Are you sure?" she pressed further. "Yeah, don't worry. It's fine," Michael reassured her. As the boys walked away, Reese said sincerely, "I hope he'll be okay," as if struggling for the right something to say, not knowing what it was, and deciding on this in the end. "I'm sure he will be," replied Jason's mother, noting the boy's genuine concern. Jason found it hard to sleep that night. When he finally dozed off, he dreamt that he was driving on a busy motorway, his parents seated in the back like a taxicab. He was demonstrating to them how driving is done safely. He kept a good distance between his and other cars, speeding up and slowing down when necessary in a smooth and harmonious way. What made this strange was not only that Jason, a 10-year-old boy, could not drive, but the fact that he was actually terrified at the prospect of driving a car. At this realization, the elements of this dream morphed and shifted, rearranging themselves into its direct opposite. Now, Jason was seated in the back of the car, with his parents in the front. His father, obviously drunk, was driving, and his mother, sitting in the passenger seat, was constantly criticizing his father's driving, finding fault in every single thing he did. Jason's father only laughed in response, saying his mother was overreacting, telling her to chill out, which only made his mother angrier. Why doesn't Mum just drive instead? Thought Jason. It made no sense to him. Worse still, Jason seemed to be the only one who noticed that the car was on the wrong side of the road, driving head-on into oncoming traffic. Cars, lorries, coaches, one by one, swerved off the road, desperately trying to avoid a head-on collision. Jason's parents, completely oblivious to this, lost in their meaningless back and forth. He yelled at them at the top of his voice to get their attention, but they paid him no mind. His father just kept driving blindly into the chaos with a smug smile on his face, while his mother carried on complaining about his father's driving. After making a tremendous effort to be noticed by his parents, Jason finally grew tired and gave up. It was like he wasn't even there. Feeling frightened, unseen, and unheard, Jason closed his eyes, tried to take his mind elsewhere, and hoped for the best. He felt this wasn't really enough, but what else could he do? 25 years later. Jason wasn't familiar with this part of London. He'd only ever passed through it a few times. He was sent here to deliver a package. It can't be that difficult, he thought. Get in, get out. Everything should be fine. Jason had come a long way since being welcomed back to South London by a rain of blows from the locals after living abroad pretty much the entirety of his childhood. He was an adult now, and yet there was still a sensitivity lurking underneath his battle-scarred, weathered exterior. He wasn't the same sweet, gullible little boy that he once was. He had no choice but to make himself savvy to the ways of his environment. From past bullies to old friends, he'd seen the streets take their souls, leaving behind bitter, empty shells of men. The sides of the roads in South London were littered with people like this, nobodies who were once somebodies, broken minds that were once sharp machines, undermined, overwhelmed by the poor hand of cards they had been dealt. The irony is that people from all over flock to the cities expecting a better quality of life, yet so many of them end up either homeless, strung out on drugs and barely subsisting, or they go on to become dealers and slumlords themselves. Jason did not want to assimilate himself into either side of this divide, yet needs do what needs must, and so he found himself on this misty night walking through one of London's most notorious drug spots, carrying enough contraband on his person to lose either his life or his freedom. Ever since that day on the hill, when those boys tricked him into getting on a bike with no brakes, he had suffered some extraordinary violence enacted on him by his peers. Being alone made him a target for street gangs. His years at secondary school were like an education in terror. At first he just took it. What else could he do? Being beaten up daily became the norm. After a while, when he saw that no one would be coming to his rescue, he learnt to fight back. With the suffering came growth, and as the years laboured by painfully, he began to come into his own as a man. His environment was the fire that baptized him and birthed a new Jason from the ashes. It built within him a resilience, a self-reliance, an inner strength which he knew somehow protected him. In fact, Jason had come into his being so much that as a character in this fictional work of creative writing, he was able to break through the figurative fourth wall, take the microphone from the narrator who is telling you this story, and effectively mute him, so that Jason could narrate his own story himself. So, like the guy was saying, I've been through this area only a handful of times in my life, but I never stay that long, mostly because it's like a junction, a place in between other places I go to and from, a place linking other places. I don't know anyone here, and besides, there's nothing here. Just the same old betting shops, dodgy pubs and off-licenses you'd find anywhere else. So I've got off the bus, and right away, it just doesn't feel right. There are some areas which have something like a negative aura about them. You feel it in the air, like some leftover echo of a terrible tragedy seeking solace in the shadows. I don't really like the vibes I'm getting from the dudes here, so I'm thinking, just find this place, deal with the matter, and get out quick. No loitering. You might be wondering why I'm on my way to meet a local drug boss with a 9-bar of South London's finest high grade, especially as the narrator said all that stuff about me coming into my being as a man. Well, it's not something I do often, but it's something that's got to be done sometimes to pay the bills, especially nowadays, where the price of things seem to go up every week. Jason didn't want to end up as one of those destitute lost souls wasting away on the roadside. The narrator would have probably said something like that right about now. Of course, not everyone is in bad shape. Those at the other end of the scale, who raise the prices, are laughing all the way to their online internet banking apps. The rich get richer, while the poor get more nihilistic, intoxicated and opiated. So, back to the story. Like my man was saying, it's a misty night. Not really fog, because you can see right through it. Ghost-like. Strange. Humid here this time of year. Anyway, it's quiet. Not the kind of quiet just before dawn, when all is peaceful and potential again, but the kind of quiet that you sense might be interrupted at any moment by some restless, malevolent force. The streets are so dimly lit, you can barely see anything but darkness. I have to use my phone light just to make sure I'm not stepping in anything. Maybe I should have just got a cab, but I figured it would be much cheaper getting a bus. I'm not a cheapskate. I just need every penny I can get my hands on right now. I did try calling a minicab when I first got here. I'm not a complete idiot, but they said the next available cab isn't for 45 minutes, and I really don't want to be waiting around these parts that long. So I've got a 15-minute walk ahead of me through winding back streets, taking me deeper and deeper into this concrete labyrinth of mist and darkness. I feel better thinking of it this way. In a labyrinth, you can't get lost as long as you stay on the path and keep moving forward. It's the mazes you have to worry about. I hear a low, deep growl. I feel it before I hear it, really. I look down and see a dog the size of a lion. Its corn-braided owner has the XL bully on a leash. He is half the size of his dog and has a crazed look about him, like he needs to be put on a leash himself. He stares me up and down, studying me, not saying a word. He doesn't need to. His stare tells me everything I need to know. I give him a slight nod, just to acknowledge him. He nods back, then looks away. I carry on walking. The dog starts barking. A vein on this dude's forehead starts throbbing, pulsing like a silent alarm going off over and above the manic look in his eyes. I feel like a new arrival walking through customs nothing to declare section at the airport, trying to feign innocence but sensing that the gig is up. I keep walking, like I don't notice any of this, as if all is well in my world. He follows me. I can almost smell gas and smoke rising up from the inner depths of this monster. The dog, I mean, not the dude, though the dude is having some kind of a meltdown now as well. Like a pinball machine, his eyes are dancing around erratically inside his skull, the gears in his brain working hard to solve the puzzle in front of him. He loosens the slack on the leash, allowing the beast to lunge forward towards me. He lets the XL bully come within half an inch of biting my ankle before yanking the animal back at the last second, just long enough to locate the source of all the concern. Maybe he learnt this move from the police canine unit. It may have been done on him in the past. He might even be a cop himself, or a customs officer on his day off. He is the thug stereotype of a drug dealer, which also means he could be an undercover. I'm not too keen on either option. Whoever this dude is, he decides that it's his right to examine the contents of my socks. He barks at me, aggressively, the dude now, not the dog, telling me to take off my shoes and socks. There is absolutely no way I'm going to comply to that demand. This dude must really be crazy. Take off your shoes now, I won't ask you again. He couldn't be more direct and to the point. He holds his dog back on the leash as if it is a gun pointed at me, his finger on the trigger. I'm really not feeling this dude's energy. I turn my back on him and walk away. I put on the performance of a lifetime as a man cool and relaxed, unbothered by these barking lunatics in the darkness, thinking maybe if I seem completely unfazed by it all, he'll eventually leave me alone. I thought about running, but the next thought I thought was that thought was stupid. It would only provoke these bullies even more. The dude calls my bluff. Pulling his symbolic trigger, he lets his beast free from the leash to pounce on me. It goes straight for my ankles, tightly clamping its jaw around my lower right leg, bringing me to the ground like a bowling ball knocking over skittles. I feel excruciating pain surging up through my body as the animal overpowers me, thrashing around and ripping at my heel as if trying to tear my foot off. I need to get this thing off me, and quick. The abuse this dog is meting out on my ankle is the reason why dogs like this were banned, and also the reason why dudes like this ignore the ban. Why Do Roses Have Thorns? Written and read by Julian Brown. The abuse this dog is meting out on my ankle is the reason why dogs like this were banned, and also the reason why dudes like this ignore the ban. I pull out the blade from my inside jacket pocket and slash at my attacker with all the strength I can muster. I hear a sound like a deflating balloon and feel warm liquid spilling on me, staining my right leg in claret. The pressure on my right leg eases as the grip of the beast's jaw slackens and its body goes limp. That lucky strike in the dark saves my life. I'm not sure what state my leg is in though. The massive adrenaline boost flowing through my veins, for now at least, hides the severity of the pain from me. The dog is dead. It lays motionless on the pavement. I look up and see the dude completely losing his rag now and walking over to me, spazzing out like a man possessed by a legion of demons. He's reaching for something in his waist. I'm not interested in finding out what it is. I try getting up off the ground. It's a surprise to me that I can. Surprisingly, I can walk and run as well. I know this because as soon as I make this discovery, I run off down a hidden path. It's so dark, I can barely see it. The path itself is not lit. It's like running head-on into a black hole. I think it may be one of those green path walkways for people partial to walking in nature. I haven't got a clue where it leads to, but right now, anywhere is better than this. The dude is in pursuit. He paused for a second or two in shock when he saw me get up off the ground. That put an extra second or two's distance between us. This is good for me, because I reached the end of the path, and instead of running out into the road, which will only make my position more vulnerable, I let him assume that's what I did and double back towards the dude to hide behind a giant oak tree. I hear the sound of a gun magazine being loaded as he passes by me, unaware that I'm only a couple of feet from him. So I stay there behind the tree until I feel the coast is clear. Not that this jungle of tower blocks and council estates is anywhere near the coast. It's just a figure of speech, I guess. I examine my ankle and see only superficial scars, nothing serious. The weed is missing though. That's what saved my foot from being ripped off. It was so densely packed in my socks, strapped around my ankles, that it effectively acted as an ankle guard. Well, at least that dog went out on a high. It might cheer up the dude a bit when he sees half a 9-bar of South London's finest laying there next to his dead dog. No, scrap that. If dog's a man's best friend, then I've got a death sentence on my head now. I just need to find this place, deliver the other half I've got strapped to my left ankle, and get the hell out of here. Problem is, I haven't got a clue where I am now. So I load up my street map app on my phone and see that I'm actually not far from the place. In fact, it's right here. That weed saved my ankle, but losing that weed might lose me my life. It's only weed, I hear you say. Not as serious as coke, pills or heroin. Thing is, it's not about what's being sold. It's more about the people who are selling it. Hard as nails, extremely sensitive types, who by the very nature of their illegal enterprise have need to be enforcers of their own rules, the law of the road. There's no governing body or regulatory authority on the streets, apart from the nutters who run them. It was a good idea, after all, to secure the contraband in knee-length football socks worn beneath 2 thick ankle-weight training bags my mum uses for step aerobics. Another layer to help hide the smell was all I thought at the time, not anticipating meeting that madman and his dog. So I knock on the door, gently, just loud enough so they'll hear it. I don't want any more unwanted attention. I'm on the balcony of a 2-story block of flats, hoping who I find behind this door will be friendlier than the locals I've already met. "Who is it?" someone answers. I say the password, "Amazon delivery," to which he replies, "We're not expecting any delivery from Amazon." Always wary of who may be watching, I realise that I haven't got anything resembling an Amazon package on me. Sloppy. I'm usually good with the details. I say the second part of the password. "It's actually for your neighbour, but they don't seem to be in. Would you mind signing it for them, please? It needs a signature." The door opens. A brute of a man stands before me, looking me over. He is a giant, ripped and tatted with a slash mark on his neck and the kind of face that revealed he was no stranger to fighting. "You better come in," he says. So I walk into the flat. There is a thick cloud of cigarette smoke hovering above the living room table. There is a couch, some chairs, and several similarly battle-scarred, ripped and tatted men with skinheads, lounging with lagers in hand, engaged in riveting conversation. The many parts become one, as in unison, every man stops speaking and looks up at me as I enter the room. I feel like a man who walked into the wrong pub. That's when I noticed the massive swastika where the flat-screen TV should be, and the Union Jack-themed wallpaper. The irony. I guess these guys didn't pay much attention in history class. There are Union Jacks and swastikas covering every wall of the apartment. So much red, white and blue, but no brown. I feel like a cow who got lost and walked into Burger King. The vibe in the place is off. I can tell I'm really not welcome here. This awkward, aggressive silence dissipates when the man who let me in points me towards the kitchen, away from the mob. I waste no more time and go straight into my explanation as I remove the padded package from behind the weight bag on my left ankle. I point to the torn threads at the bottom of my right trouser leg as proof of my far-fetched story. He looks puzzled. He listens and doesn't say a word. He asks me to wait here and walks back into the other room. I think to myself, if I only have half the stash, then he only has to give me half the money. Fair's fair, and we're all square. These things happen. The man comes back into the kitchen with another guy who's twice the size of the first guy. Together, they are a formidable pair. Both of them just stand there staring at me, like two men considering various ways to carve up a large piece of meat. I experience a minor existential crisis, reflecting on all that has led me to being here, in this time and space, in this moment. Huge energy bills, rent arrears, spiraling out of control payday loan debts, county court judgments, long-term unemployment, long-term sickness, benefit sanctions, bailiffs. In that order, the scenes flash by in my mind's eye. Yet there were high hopes for me. A lot of talk about my potential when I was growing up. When I wasn't being tortured at school, my grades weren't that bad and I had good exam results. When I wasn't being robbed at knife point by street gangs, I was learning new things at college and university. When I wasn't facing eviction, I was taking in wisdom. When I wasn't addicted to prescription medication, I was on a mission of upliftment and elevation. I used to like to write. Stories, rhymes, poems, songs. I found it difficult to write though. In between people kicking your front door in and being kept up all night by the sound of sex workers being pounded mercilessly in the flat above me, it was hard to really focus on anything for any amount of time. Eventually I knocked that idea on the head though. Mum persuaded me it wasn't worth it. Writing was too risky a career choice, probably wouldn't make any money. Maybe if I had followed that dream, I wouldn't be standing here now with these two nut jobs looking at me like they want to murder me. I explained to them that they only have to pay half and that I would sort it out at the other end. Even if I can't afford to pay it all back, he might have some odd jobs I can do to settle the bill. Anything's better than my life. I chatted my arse off, really trying to get them to hear me. They seemed to have mercy on me. The doorman pulled out an envelope, opened it, counted out exactly half the amount and gave me the other half. On parting, they made sure to let me know that they weren't happy about this, and that next time they would prefer someone who isn't so darkly packed to deliver the stash. I think of the De La Soul song they may have borrowed this term from. "What will the neighbours think?" one of them says, "seeing someone like you knocking on our door." I remember a line about choosing your battles and decide not to respond. I walk out without saying goodbye. I've done the job now, well, half of it. So I return to the sender. I try and explain everything in a voice note. Hopefully he'll understand. It's just one of those things. Could have been worse, and I'll make it up to him in the end. I decide to call a cab. Luckily for me, one comes immediately and I'm on my way. Away from this godforsaken place with its badly lit streets, madmen, monsters and mayhem. I don't plan on returning anytime soon. The stab wound in my back keeps speaking to me. I know that sounds weird, but I don't know how else to put it. At first it was just a pain, frequently flaring up and bothering me, until one day I asked it directly what it was trying to tell me. I was surprised when I got a reply. Not an audible voice, really, more like words forming in my head. I'm here to remind you. Remind me of what? That's what you have to work out. Can you at least give me a clue? If I did that, it would be as good as giving you the answer. What's wrong with that? Then you wouldn't have worked it out on your own. That's the whole point. It's the journey, not the destination. Are you here to remind me how fragile life really is? Partly, but there's more. Go deeper. I thought for a moment, remembering the day I received the wound, deeper than it is wide. It's something to do with betrayal, isn't it? Being stabbed in the back, literally. Am I getting warm? You might be. Can you at least confirm whether I'm on the right track or not? I'm sorry, I can't. It's something you must realize, know, by yourself, and for yourself. How will I know when I've worked it out? You won't hear from me again. At the time this happened, the pain eased up soon after, leaving me thinking I may have been close with my last guess. Since then, though, the wound regularly makes its presence known, physically, mentally, sometimes emotionally, cryptic and mysterious. So this conversation is still not over. I'm back at my flat now. After all of tonight's adventures, I need to switch off, chill out. I'm so restless though, and it doesn't matter how much weed I smoke, it has no effect. I may as well be smoking cigarettes. I find myself scrolling endlessly on Instagram. I like a post I see, claiming that there's scientific evidence now that people with racist and prejudiced views have smaller brains. I don't know if it's true, don't know if it's satire. Made me laugh though. I reposted, adding the words, "man in his most primitive state." Within a few minutes I get a few likes, a few laughing face emojis, fire flames and 100s, a few comments either praising the post or condemning it. For some reason, this calms me down a bit, takes the edge off. I am reunited again with a sense of equilibrium, normality, albeit a sense of normality normal only to the smoke and mirrors world of social media. I put the kettle on to make a cup of tea. I get a reply from the sender. He's not happy, obviously. Says he's been on the phone the past 10 minutes with the Nazis. He says they're threatening to cut ties with him over this, especially after seeing my post on Instagram. The sender quoted one of them for added effect. It was already bad enough having that knick-knock knocking on our door, but to have him openly disrespect us with that disgusting post was one step too far. If the sender didn't do something to appease them, to make up for this humiliation, they might even consider going to war with him. My post on Instagram. I check my Insta page. It's lit up with notifications. Plenty of new comments on that last repost. Many of them seeming to come from the doorman and his big friend who was sizing me up in the kitchen. I could tell this from their profile pictures. They were saying awful things, the kind of things you'd expect people like that to say, but also more. They were saying, "We know where you live. We're coming for you. We're on our way right now." The first word that comes to mind is shit. That word is then followed by other more extreme words which I don't wish to repeat here. They don't even filter their threats, what they plan to do to me when they get to me. Don't they realise this is all evidence that can be used against them in a court of law? They're probably so angry they don't even care. Red mist. Unresolved, trapped anger will do that to a person. Well, so much for that cup of tea. I get on the phone to the sender. He's not picking up. I send him a voice note saying these guys are threatening me, that he needs to help me out, send backup, do something. He replies a couple of minutes later with a short message that reads, "Until you pay me what you owe me, you're on your own, mate." Great. I've known this guy for years, and this is how he treats me when the shit hits the fan. I'm in a literal shitstorm, nearly shitting myself, as I hear loud banging and shouting from downstairs. Then my buzzer goes off, relentlessly, so much that after a while all the buzzes form one continuous buzz tone of heightened anxiety. I look out the front window, concealing myself behind the curtain, and see at least 20 men, some with bats, metal pipes and poles, trying to force their way in through the communal entrance to the block. Good luck with that, I thought. Those doors could withstand the force of an RPG. Well, maybe not, but they're strong. Either way, how long would they hold out? Or how long before one of my neighbours decides to buzz them up just to put an end to all the noise? It is now well after 2 a.m. The mob are shamelessly shouting their heads off, not concerned with who hears or sees them, taking turns to try and kick the door down. They are not coming for money. They are not coming for drugs. They are coming for my life. That's when I realised that this is the time I've been waiting for. That's why I've got this sword. That's why I've got this mask. All roads seem to have led here to this moment. So like an actor rehearsing his lines, I get ready for the performance of a lifetime. Except this is no dress rehearsal. This is the main event. The mask is an Oni mask from Japan. Came by it in an antique store. Something about the mask captivated me. It seemed to speak to me from the shelf, compelling me to buy it. The guy in the shop said that the mask is like the Greek evil eye, protecting its wearer from evil spirits. Demonically grotesque in appearance, yet strangely beautiful, the Oni mask made me think of a vicious older brother who would scare away all the bullies and beat any who resisted into an unrecognisable pulp. A guardian from the other side, who spoke their language and knew all their tricks. The sword I bought a few years back when I was going through my samurai phase. I became obsessed with everything samurai, from books on Bushido and Ronin to the Hagakure and the Book of Five Rings by Miyamoto Musashi. At that point in time, like many others, when I became so disillusioned with life, so disconnected from the world around me, so unmoored from what others consider to be real, that I completely immersed myself in another reality. A long-gone era where life was brutal and archaic, desperate and bloody. Still, despite this, life was not so complex and complicated like it is today. The modern-day confusion about people's place in society, gender roles, the constant assault on our senses from advertisers, political figures and influencers suffocating us with their propaganda, their psychological manipulations designed to lobotomize us, projecting their warped norms and narratives to insidiously seduce us into complying with their hidden agendas. And all that before it even reaches lunchtime. The ancient Japanese samurais didn't have any of these concerns. Their life was simple, everything summed up in 3 words: death before dishonor. I feel a surge of energy rise up through me as I place the mask over my face. What the hell was that, I think? Adrenaline? And then, I don't seem to think anymore. I just act. The curtains are drawn, and Act 1 commences. A strange confidence overwhelms me, strange in the face of 20 angry men with weapons baying for my blood at my front door. I pick up the sword and feel a sense of oneness, as if I am now complete. On my way out, I catch my reflection in the bathroom mirror. The mask is terrifying. What you'd expect an angel of death to look like. I make my way down the communal stairs. It's more quiet now than before. I figure they've tired themselves out quite a bit trying to get that door open. They are not expecting what they see next, and so are not sure at first how to react. I am in all black, black trainers, black gloves, black hood, and of course, black mask. The only thing not black is the shiny silver of my sword. I open the door that they have been battering for the past 10 minutes and stand before them in horse stance, holding the sword at my side. I say nothing. They say nothing. I feel as if I could stand still here in this position for hours. It's like I am meditating. I wonder if I am really here and if this is really happening, or if I am actually sitting on my couch in deep theta state, imagining the whole thing. Same difference, some part of me says. The way they've all gone silent and seem so stunned, I realise that they don't know it's me. What I mean is, they just see this dude in all black masked up with a sword. They don't know who it is. To them, it could be anybody. Before now, this sword was only a prop, a decoration. Now, it will be the difference between life and death. But do you know how to use it? I hear you ask. Some part of me answers, saying it's not so much about knowing how to use it. It's more about being in touch with the source which created it and brought it into being. All I knew was to let go, that to switch off the worrier mind was to switch on the warrior mind. They look absolutely perplexed, like what the fuck? They don't know what to make of me. I think it's the statue-like stillness that creeps them out. I'm sure some of them are wondering now too whether this is really happening, or if they are actually drunk and passed out on their couch imagining the whole thing. Then one of them starts with the mouth, then another, saying things like, come on you motherfucker, fuck off back to where you came from. So you think you're hard then? The noise has a domino effect, and each man in turn adds foul curses and threats of his own until the chorus is in full swing and the men feel more like themselves again. Like a legion of doom in front of me, the noise as catalyst. The individual men combine into one amorphous mass of putrid venom and hatred. They are no longer a mob of unruly men. They are now one being, a demonic entity comprised of many parts. The men are like its limbs. Some part of me says, we meet again. Perfectly still, I do nothing, say nothing in response, as if nothing has changed. I can smell the alcohol on their breaths, its breath. Then they get a bit brave, don't they? Alcohol will do that. They get a bit of that liquid confidence and start egging each other on. Let's have him, lads. I can't recall much of what happened next, apart from what seemed like a series of dance steps. I feel as if I've just woken up from a strange dream that I can't quite remember. I am holding the blood-stained sword out in front of me. I look down and see arms, legs, heads, fingers, intestines and various other body parts scattered around all over the place. I look up and see the other ones looking back at me. There's only 5 of them now. They were loud and brash before. Now they look as if the wind might blow them away, as if a feather could knock them down. I figure these ones don't need to die, but it's really up to them. The light in their eyes is gone now. They are no threat to me. I shout, "Boo!" suddenly, and all 5 of them run away. All except their dog, another damned bully XL. It's massive, like the one before. Unleashed now, foaming at the mouth and screaming for revenge, the beast jumps at me. One carefully placed slice is all it takes, and the animal's cleanly severed head is flying through the air, eventually landing on my neighbour's balcony above, right next to his aloe vera plant. He'll get a shock in the morning when he opens his screen doors. That's 2 dogs now, in one night. The dismembered body parts of at least 15 men litter the pavement and communal garden like some sick scene from a manga film. And all for what? A post on social media. Was it really worth it? I'm pissed off now. I didn't really want to kill all these people. It wasn't my intention. How sincere does that sound, though, coming from a man in all black wielding a samurai sword? To be honest, I don't even remember doing any of it. I don't know how I did it. Maybe it will come back to me in a dream. Survival mode kicks in. I need to get rid of the sword and the mask and these clothes. No one will be able to positively identify me, but the men were shouting up at my window before all this carnage kicked off, so the finger will point towards me either way. I can't be connected to any of this. My alibi will be that I was in bed sleeping with earplugs in, so I didn't hear anything. I can't sleep without earplugs because of the neighbour's dogs barking all night. I take off all the garb and put on a pair of dark blue jeans, a black polo shirt, black baseball cap and a dark grey hoodie. I walk to a side road a few minutes away from the high street and wait for a night bus. There's only one an hour at this time of night, so there should be one arriving in a few minutes. I leave my phone at home. I'm heading to a steel plant on the other side of town. I worked there once as a night security guard. Due to this experience, I have the priceless knowledge of how to get in and out of the plant undetected. There is a secret door that was built in case of emergencies, providing direct access from the street to the room where the blast furnace is. The landmark leading to this secret entrance is a peculiarly shaped abstract art piece set amongst some weeping willows in a public park nearby. I remember this place easily, because this strangely shaped object, compiled of various materials, always reminded me of the head shape of one of my ex-girlfriends. It's a difficult thing to explain, but as soon as I see it, I'm like, yeah, that's the one. Of course, I'm not meant to know anything about this intricate network of underground tunnels connecting various high-profile financial institutions and interests, some shady, some aligned with more noble aims, all kept secret beneath all the hustle and bustle of London's roads. I've found, though, that if I get in with the right people, they tell me all sorts of things. This is because people don't tend to see me as a threat. Unlike a lot of men, I don't throw my weight around and act superior or hard to try and demand respect. And yet I am solid. Well, Mum always says to treat people how you'd like to be treated. So people confide in me, tell me things they really shouldn't, and so I know how to get into the steel mill without being seen by the cameras. The sword just about fits into a suitcase if I lay it down diagonally. Once I'm in, it's just a case of firing up the furnace and placing the weapon into its mouth, returning it to the fire it was forged in. I stand back in awe, fascinated, watching this steel sword glowing, becoming soft and flowing, slowly becoming one with the lake of fire. The mask and the clothes I was wearing go into the incinerator. Well, the clothes do. I can't quite bring myself to destroy the mask. It's just so beautiful. Maybe I feel this way because I know I couldn't have survived without it. And after that experience, the Oni mask is like a part of me now. But if wearing it brings destruction into the world on that scale, maybe it should go into the fire. I give in to my weakness and decide to keep the mask, throwing it back into the suitcase. Who knows? I might need it again one day. So I'm walking back to my block now, and lo and behold, the scene is just as I left it. The estate is not swarming with police and crime scene investigators in hazmat suits. There is no yellow tape separating the onlooking crowd from the ghastly spectacle of severed heads and legs. I calmly walk up the stairs to my flat, thinking this is an indictment of our culture. 2 hours have passed since, and not one person has bothered to call the police. There is this idea proposed by social scientists, as demonstrated by the infamous Liverpool Street Station social experiment, that when there are a large number of people around, as there are in this compact concrete jungle, people are much less likely to respond to a person in distress or in an emergency, assuming that somebody else will probably do something about it. Add to this that people have become almost desensitized to the sound of human distress, being afflicted with this particularly invasive type of noise pollution on a daily basis, to the point now where it's just become mildly annoying. There's also the chance that somebody witnessed the whole thing, or walked onto the scene at some point after it happened, but decided not to do anything, as they didn't want to end up like those guys. That one's probably highest up on the list. I shower and then put the kettle on for a cuppa. Sod's law. The police start knocking violently at my front door. Open up, it's the police. This feels like deja vu now. So much for that cup of tea. Why Do Roses Have Thorns? Written and read by Julian Brown. Sod's law. The police start knocking violently at my front door. Open up, it's the police. This feels like deja vu now. So much for that cup of tea. I open the door and I'm rushed to the ground by about 5 officers in all black, faces covered. I'm handcuffed and roughed up a bit. I keep asking, what's going on? Why are you doing this? My questions receive no reply, and I'm escorted out of the block by this band of brothers past what is now a very different state of affairs from what I saw before. The scene is now a crime scene, with police everywhere, men and women in hazmat suits, and a white tent erected in the centre of the estate. Once at the station, the handcuffs are taken off, and the police apologise for all the rough treatment. I'm not under arrest, they just want me to help with their inquiries. The officer in plain clothes explains that they had to exercise extreme precautions under the circumstances and treat everybody they came into contact with as potential suspects. I can't really complain. They're only doing their jobs, and they are human beings too, with their own fears and their own families that they want to return to. To be quite honest with you, I quite like the police. Not to say I haven't had a couple of run-ins with them in the past that weren't all that pleasant, but where would we be without them? We'd be tearing each other to shreds. So finally I get to have that cup of tea, except not in the warmth of my flat, but here in this cold interrogation room at the police station. It's not dark, like those gloomy hellish rooms you see in crime thrillers, but bright and almost welcoming, like those ones you see in true crime documentaries. I'm left alone with my tea and my thoughts, told to hold on. Someone will be coming to speak with me soon. Half an hour goes by, slowly, and still no one has come. The stab wound in my back starts speaking to me again, but I'm still not sure what it's trying to tell me. I walk out into the corridor, asking a female copper how long I'll have to wait. Someone will be with me shortly, she says, and ushers me back into the room, asking me if I want another cuppa. I start sensing something's not right after another half hour goes by and still no interrogator. That second cup of tea doesn't materialise either. I remember the first guy saying that I'm not under arrest, so I make to leave. I've had enough. I'm tired and I just want to go home. Just as I reach the door, I'm met by 2 officers in plain clothes who persuade me to sit back down. One of them seems familiar. Not sure where I know him from, but I've seen his face before. They explained that they received a call from one of my neighbours at around 4:30 a.m, alerting the police to the caller's discovery of a severed dog's head on his balcony. The caller went on to describe, somewhat hysterically, the blood and gore they saw all around the communal entrance and gardens outside. Police arrived on the scene at 4:36 a.m. and were able to confirm the caller's story. Forensic investigators were called, and there is now an ongoing effort to establish the identities of the victims. No, I don't know anything about any of this, I told him, raising my eyebrows in wonder at what I am being told. I slept through the whole thing. They don't look like they buy my story. One of them leaves the room. The familiar one stays. He looks me dead in the eye and says, "Where do I know you from?" I reply, "I don't know. I was thinking the same thing." Then it clicks. I read his name from his ID badge pinned to his jumper. Detective Inspector Reese Robbins. I was that little boy who nearly died after you and your mates put me on a bike with no brakes, I say to him. His eyes light up. That was my welcome back to London after living abroad for a few years. You guys brought me back up to speed pretty quickly, I say to him. Thanks for that, I add sarcastically. He looks again at the file he's holding in front of him and reads my name off the top. Jason Rose. Of course I remember you. There's an awkward silence. I break it. Well, I'm glad you do. I'll never forget all the things you guys did to me. This line seems to strike him, hit him somewhere deep inside. He looks down, like he's embarrassed, like he's been caught doing something wrong. I let him off the hook a bit. To be fair though, you didn't do that much. It was all them. He meets me halfway, saying, well, according to the law, if you were hurt in the transmission of a crime and I was part of the group committing that crime, I'd be liable too, even if I never laid a hand on you. I agree with him. Yeah, it's a pity I didn't have the law to protect me back then. It's a pretty lawless time, childhood. This revelation about who I am, what our connection is, seems to have shaken his cool considerably. I feel for him. He was always part of the entourage of boys, picking on me, beating me up, shoving my head down the toilet, but I could tell he didn't really want to be there. He didn't have the same sadistic bloodlust in his eyes that the other boys did. His look was more of concern, that the boys might go too far one day, that he might get into trouble too. He was in many ways just another casualty of a brutal environment, another victim trying to survive, hedging his bets. All of us, funneled against our will through the school to hell pipeline. Being related to known and feared gang members, having a cousin in the Ghetto Boys and a brother in the Peckham Boys, provided a kind of diplomatic immunity for Reese. There were a few kids like that I remember from school, who never once in those long cold 5 years got rushed and beaten up severely the way that most of us did. Truly, nobody wanted the drama that would come from it. But still, boys like Reese were not completely free. He may have had a special privilege due to his gang affiliations, but he wasn't able to change anything. He wasn't able to say no. And these same relatives would turn on him violently if they thought he was being soft. So he went along with it, played his part, kept quiet when teachers asked him what happened, who was involved. The inspector seems to go off somewhere in his thoughts. He's there, yet he's not there. Then he returns, lifts his head and speaks. I'm sorry I didn't do anything to stop it. When we put you on the bike without brakes, I mean. I knew what was about to happen, and I knew it was wrong. But they would never have listened to me if I tried to get them to stop. They would have put me on the bike too, or worse. And to be honest, I was more than just a little curious to see how it would all play out. How you'd react once you realised halfway down the hill that you were riding a death trap. Boys will be boys, I guess. I feel as if the detective's monologue is still not finished, so I keep my lip zipped, thinking how strange it is to hear a confession from a detective inspector in the middle of my interrogation, as if he's the one being investigated. He continues. I felt really bad about that after. You seemed so helpless and innocent. The way you were still trying your best to laugh along with the boys who nearly killed you. The look on your mother's face when we took you back home. It all really irked me for a while. I didn't want to play out with Michael and Xavier anymore if all we were going to do was go around torturing kids all the time. I started saying I wasn't feeling well when they knocked for me, so I wouldn't have to be a part of it. I had to fool my mum too, or she'd just say I was being silly and pressure me out the door to be with them. This led to what may be called an unhealthy maladaptive defence mechanism, whereby I would make myself unwell just so I didn't have to go outside. I'm not sure how I did it exactly, just knew that if I said I wasn't feeling well, shortly after I would actually start feeling ill. Mum would put the back of her hand against my forehead or something and confirm it. Mike and Xavier started calling me the ill one, diseased Reese. Of course, it wasn't as easy to do that at school, so I could never really escape it. It seems as if Reese has had this on his mind for some time, and my presence in front of him has stirred it all up again. There's something he needs to tell me, so I give him space to say it. Jason Rose. Imagine seeing you in here, and me, the school bully, as the detective checking out your story. You couldn't write this stuff, could you? I wonder for a moment if he is aware that at one point I wanted to be a writer. Strange thing to say, I know, Reese continues, but it's because of you that I became a copper. True, it would be some time before I came to that conclusion, after years of feeling like I was on the wrong side of things, or worse still, sitting on the fence. I felt like my life was just that, sitting on the fence in various poses. I didn't like what we were doing to people, robbing them, beating them up, slapping them around, humiliating them in front of everyone. But I didn't do anything to stop it, until one day I had enough. I signed up with the force, joined the police. No one in my family could believe it. They practically disowned me, especially after I showed everyone what side of the fence I was on now. I arrested my own cousin, Xavier, on aggravated assault and battery charges, and saw the case all the way through to prosecution. From that day on, I was considered dead to my family, and I found my new home with the police force. Getting a bit tired now of the detective's sentimental speech, his long drawn-out attempt to absolve himself of his past sins, I finally speak up. Must be nice having somewhere you belong. It is, he says. But my job, my life, it didn't all just fall into my lap. I had to work hard to get where I am. I'm not belittling your success, I reply. I'm just saying, as a child, you don't have much choice over where you belong. Well, I didn't. My parents liked to travel. It meant that I got to see more of this world in a few years than most Londoners will see in a lifetime. But it also meant that I was never in one country for more than 2 years at a time. Never got to form close bonds with anyone, family and friends alike. I pause. Now I'm feeling emotional. I take a deep breath and continue without the frog in my throat. Being an outcast is all I know. I was always the new kid. As you know yourself, the new kid has to be tested by his peers. So I grew up being a constant target of bullies and class clowns trying to get a few laughs at my expense. I'd finally start to make a friend or two, but by then my parents were already packing their suitcases, and before I knew it, we were on our way to the next destination on their great travel plan. They never asked me how I felt about it. If they did, I would have said, let's just stay here. I'm making friends now, feeling a bit more settled. But no one was ever interested in what I thought. I'm sure they had your best interests at heart, Reese offers. No, they just assumed that whatever they wanted to do was in my best interest. There's a big difference. Maybe both can be true, replies Reese. Maybe your parents really wanted to live abroad, somewhere nice and hot. Anywhere's better than London in the winter. And maybe they thought it'd be a good thing for you to grow up seeing the world, experiencing different cultures. It's not a bad idea, really. I feel the need for a cigarette for some reason. Still, I don't want to stay here any longer than necessary, so I figure it can wait until question time at the station is over. Probably, I say, while eyeing the clock in an obvious way, signalling my desire to leave soon. I continue. I honestly don't know what they thought about me. Whenever I bring this up with them, they just change the subject. There's a lot of things from my childhood my parents don't like talking about. Reese Robbins shuffles around in his chair for what seems like an eternity, and then says, So let me get this straight. You were moved around a lot from school to school as a child. This made it hard for you to make and maintain friendships, And the inevitable end result of all this is you becoming a mass murderer and dismembering 15 men and a dog on your doorstep. It wasn't just school to school, I correct the inspector, but country to country, culture to culture, from one place with its set rules and accepted norms to another with entirely different expectations. It was disorienting, tiring, not to mention all the fighting, the arguing, my dad's alcoholism, and my mum's mental health problems, all things they completely deny now, of course. They tried to persuade me I remembered it all wrong, but there are some things that happen to you as a child that you never forget. And no, I didn't kill 15 men and a dog either. Reese makes his full transformation back to detective now. The time for show and tell is over. So why did we find a bloody mask in your flat then, Jason? Seemingly the same mask the assailant is wearing in the CCTV footage of the incident. And why are you seen leaving the block at 2:30 a.m. with a suitcase, when you told us you were in bed sleeping through the whole thing? The frog is back in my throat, but this frog is panicking. I'm usually good with the details. I put it down to my complete lack of expertise in these areas. I'm just an out-of-work night watchman, a 0 hours contract security guard with too many gaps in my employment history to get a proper job. I actually owe more money than I have. As soon as any money comes in, twice as much goes back out. Forever tightrope walking on the unforgiving edge of my overdraft limit, my life has become a desperate struggle to settle a debt that can never be settled, pay back a loan that can never be paid back, to satisfy a ravenous, greedy beast that refuses to be satisfied. Amid this barrage of internal self-pity, all I can manage to say to the inspector is, I quite like antique masks. They're pretty cool. He looks at me like he thinks I'm trying to be slick, like I'm toying with him, but I'm not. It must have come out wrong, sounded off. I was trying my best not to sound nervous, but came off as villainous instead. Detective Inspector Robbins holds me in his gaze for a while, silently, contemplatively, as if he is downloading some invisible data stream from the etheric substance, interlacing all the air around and between us. I can't read him anymore. Reese is gone. Only the inspector remains. Abruptly, without a word, he stands up and leaves the room. He returns a few minutes later, accompanied by a middle-aged lady covered from head to toe in a long shawl, seemingly handmade with an interesting blend of various indigenous cultural fabrics and prints. I see everything from Chinese silk to Aztec prints to kente cloth in the mix. Her eyes are deep wells. They say everything, yet give nothing away. That saying about gazing deep into the abyss and it staring back at you comes to mind. Even though I've got my hoodie on, I feel cold and naked in her presence. She sits down across the table from me. I'm a bit confused, like, what's going on? I open my mouth to speak, but I can't. My lips move, but no words come out. I feel the woman scanning me, reading me, holding me somehow, preventing me from moving or speaking. Inspector Robbins doesn't seem shocked at all, like he's seen it all before. Suddenly, the scenery shifts around me. I am no longer in a police interrogation room. I am in the kitchen of my family home. I'm 9 years old again, and my mother is telling me to make sure my father doesn't drink too much. Why aren't you coming, Mum? I'm upset because I thought we were all going out together, and we'll be the odd ones out again. I'm not feeling well, my mum replies. But you were fine earlier, I say. I'm confused. I was looking forward to the party before, but now I'm not so sure I want to go. But Mum is telling me, forcefully now, to make sure my dad doesn't drink too much, and to make sure he doesn't drive home if he does. I'm 9 years old. How am I meant to know how much alcohol is too much for an adult? I'm annoyed. I just want to play with the other kids. I just want us to be a normal family. Why do we have to be the only family there without a mum? Now I'm in the car passenger seat. My dad is driving, his eyes glazed over. He's not doing too badly. He comes close to the curb a lot, sometimes mounting the pavement, but nothing serious. Maybe Dad's right and Mum is just overreacting after all. We're back home now. Mum is pissed. Jason, I thought I told you to make sure your father didn't drink too much. He's drunk. She's angry at my dad, but seems more angry at me. I let her down. Again. I feel terrible. Then they start arguing. I don't want to hear it tonight, so I go in the other room. But it's really late. There's no other sounds, so I can hear everything they say anyway. My dad is calling my mum some terrible things that I don't think he'd ever say if he was sober. The next day, my dad can't remember saying anything like that. It must have been because he was drunk. But Mum is still angry at him, and with me. She stops talking to me for about a week. I feel awful. She says she can't rely on me. I let her down again. The scenery shifts once more. I'm back in the room with the detective and the strange lady sitting across the table from me. The clock on the wall shows only a minute has passed, but it feels like an hour. Then the woman smiles like she's got what she needed from me and gets up from the table. The inspector escorts the mysterious silent lady out of the room and I'm left alone again. I find I can move again. I stand up just because I can. It feels good. I can talk again. I feel great about this too. But I think that maybe less is more from here on. Maybe I've already said enough. I have no idea what just happened to me. Before I can even play it back in my head, Inspector Robbins and another male officer enter the room. The vibe is different now. They're not finished with me, but they're finished with talking. Robbins reads me my rights while the other guy gets me to stand up so he can cuff me. I'm told all about my right to remain silent, wishing now that I did. If only I'd got rid of the mask, I think. It would have been harder to connect me to all of this if all they had was some footage of me walking around with a suitcase at 2:30 in the morning. I'm led to a cell in the station. Later, I'm transported to a remand prison. Not a nice place, but that's the whole point, I guess. The food, if you can call it that, makes you want to go on a hunger strike. It's cold all the time, and there are mice in the walls. They come out at night and keep me company. I don't know whether I'm happy or not being locked up for 23 hours a day, considering some of the characters in here. The inspector visited me not long before my trial started. He told me that lady was a psychic, that she helps them out with a lot of their major crime cases. Apparently she's got a 100% accuracy rate. She's never been wrong about one of her hunches. He told me a lot of things, probably because he knows no one's going to believe anything I say now anyway. The police use psychics all the time, he told me. The only reason you don't hear about it much is sometimes the psychic wants to remain anonymous, says it might mess with their mojo or something if they get cast into the limelight. That, and it wouldn't be a good look for the police to be working with clairvoyants and mystics. Their public image is bad enough as it is. I'll spare you all the gory details of my court case. It went on for ages, and there were all kinds of problems with selecting the jury, with jurors either being too sympathetic to racist ideology or too much in condemnation of it. This held up the trial for a while. Oh yeah, that corn-braided dude whose dog I killed. He was a copper after all, part of an undercover sting operation for drug couriers. He testified at my trial. No matter who addressed him, the judge or one of the briefs, the guy never once took his cold stare off me throughout his entire testimony. He even got told off a few times for it. Remember what I said about man's best friend? I've got a feeling this isn't the last time I'll see him. Ultimately, it didn't work out well for me. Think of one life sentence times 15. And they even threw in a few more years for the dogs too. I wonder if this accumulation of life sentences will affect me in future lifetimes. Anyway, I'll hand you back to the narrator now because I think he does a better job of this overall than I do. I just thought that since it's my story, why am I getting some other guy to narrate it? I should be the one to tell it. You can rest assured that you heard it all from the horse's mouth. I'll let the narrator conclude though, as he seems eager to take the mic back, and I feel he is somewhat more eloquent in his speech and delivery than I am. Thank you for listening. It feels really good to get all that off my chest. Better out than in, as they say. So that was the story of Jason Rose. I am sure that if I, as the narrator, had told Jason's story, it would have been very different. To say there were quite a few exaggerations as well as outright lies puts it mildly. But since it's his story, I guess he has the right to tell it his way. Jason sat in his cell waiting for the guards to come and take him for his daily walk around the prison yard. He looked forward to this hour away from his cell, even though he was flanked tightly by guards who barely spoke to him and wasn't able to have any contact with other prisoners. It felt so good just to stretch his legs and see other human beings. He was surprisingly somewhat prepared for this extreme solitude, realizing now that he'd felt profoundly alone for most of his life. Even when Jason was surrounded by friends and family, in fact, especially at these times, he felt an emptiness, a loneliness, and a disconnection from the rest of humankind. He had found during his as yet short time on the planet that man was rarely kind and more often hostile and malicious. Surrendering to this aloneness seemed the best option considering his present circumstances, losing himself in the void. He read in a newspaper about how his trial became trending news across the globe, polarizing public opinion, with some considering him a hero and others seeing him only as a villain who didn't deserve to see the light of day ever again. Maybe this was the reason they kept such a tight hold on him in here. Half the prison population hated and wanted to kill him. The other half built him up into some kind of enigmatic cult leader. All he'd ever wanted was a friend, and now that would be impossible, since it was too high a risk to have him mix with other inmates. He was allowed paper and a pencil though, and so found himself returning to one of his old pastimes that didn't require company: writing. In time, he managed to earn more hours out of his cell with good behavior, and eventually Jason enrolled on a diploma course in horticulture, providing him with a small allotment to take care of, and had the chance at last to connect with other inmates on the same course. They were tasked to grow flowers. Many of these would end up being sold to the public in garden centres. The best of the best floral arrangements would be exhibited at the RHS Chelsea Flower Show. Jason grew roses, red at first, and then every colour under the rainbow. Others found it amusing that he did this, his last name being Rose. As he tended his patch, growing beautiful flowers from seed, he wondered why roses have thorns. Jason learned that it was actually a common misconception that roses have thorns. Most people call any sharp appendage on a flower stem a thorn, but what roses have are prickles. Thorns are modified branches, whereas prickles are sickle-shaped outgrowths of the stem itself. These prickles make it difficult for herbivores to climb up the stem to the leaves. They also support the stem, help roses retain water, and protect rose bushes from too much sunlight. This made Jason think of a beautiful princess in the top room of a tower, with her own army surrounding and protecting her on all sides. A well-equipped, resourceful army that grew out from the princess's own spine. Some botanists still argue over this point of roses having thorns or prickles. But one thing is certain. The purpose of these thorns and prickles is to protect these plants from would-be predators. Alone in his cell, Jason picked up his pencil, intending to write a poem, reflecting on the deeper meaning of roses to him, contemplating everything from their association with love and romance dating back to ancient times, to their sharp and prickly exterior. He saw the rose as a most unusual and delicate yet dangerous flower. That's a bit like me, Jason thought to himself. End of Why Do Roses Have Thorns? Written and read by Julian Brown. Jason Rose. Jason Rose. Imagine seeing you in here. All I knew was to let go, that to switch off the worrier mind was to switch on the warrior mind. Jason Rose. Jason Rose. Imagine seeing you in here. All I knew was to let go, that to switch off the worrier mind was to switch on the warrior mind. Jason Rose. Imagine seeing